Howdy from the Texas Real Estate Research Center at Texas A&M University. Been looking a lot at Texas rural land trends recently. To think about what happened over the last year, it's really important to put it in context, I think, going back to 2020. And particularly in 2021, beginning about the first quarter of 2021, we saw tremendous run-up in prices. This was one of these extraordinary periods in time where we saw things that are just not usual. Like, for example, at the end of 2021, the annualized statewide price was up 28% year over year. That is just extraordinary. At the same time, sales activity also was very high. It ran up significantly, almost 40% into beginning of 2022. Now, you may recall that at the same time, inflation started to pick up in 2021. We don't think that's what caused it per se, but it's definitely correlated with that. At the same time, it was in the second quarter of 2022 that the Fed began to raise interest rates, and just so happens we see a decline in market activity around that same time, and it's a pretty drastic transition in both those periods, first quarter of 21, second quarter of 2022. Saw this huge run up in price and activity through that period of first quarter of 2022. And then beginning about that time, we saw a transition where prices were still climbing year over year, but at a rate more moderate, although still high by historical standards, but it continued to decline through 2022 and into 2023 in particular. At the same time, the level of market activity really started to decline in 2022. And in 2023 in particular, we hit lows that we had not seen in 10 years or more. So, for example, in many parts of the state, we were at levels that we haven't seen since 2012 or 2013 in regards to activity. But prices were still holding up, and prices continuing to rise year over year. Through 2024, we saw that rate of price increase continue to decline, but still an increase. We ended the year up 1.88%, which is very consistent with what we had forecasted several quarters prior. Using our model, we expected annualized price to be up about 2%, so really close there. We also expected to see activity moderate. The number of sales, the total dollar volume, the number of acres sold were down through 2023, but in 2024 we saw pretty much across the board stabilization. There are a couple exceptions to that. And in fact, we recently published our Texas Rural Lands Market fourth quarter trends. Encourage you to look at that report on our website. And what you'll see in there is not only the statewide analysis, some of which I just talked about, but look at each region in particular and you'll see some significant differences from one region to another. The Panhandle, for example, which is very much an agricultural base there, we still see very strong prices, and that's mainly driven by very large tracts. But at the same time, market activity has continued to be weak, if you will, at low levels, and just still slightly declining year over year. Another example of that decline, but to a greater degree, is Northeast Texas. The Northeast Texas region, prices have still been strong, compared to the quarters before, the year before, and so on. We're still seeing good price growth, but we have not even found sort of a bottom, if you will, in regards to sales activity in Northeast Texas, and that's extraordinary. That's the only region where I would say that is the case, because in most other regions we've seen not necessarily tremendous growth, but certainly we've come up off the bottom that we saw in 2023 in almost every other region, like we have statewide. So we've seen some improvement in statewide activity through 2024. Now we're really at an inflection point, I think, in the market where looking forward into 2025, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens next. Our forecast model is telling us that we should expect to see statewide prices decline a little bit year over year, somewhere between 0 and say -2%. At the same time, we think that we won't see continued drop off in sales activity. We even may see some slight improvements in sales activity and total acres sold across the state. Obviously, there's going to be tremendous variation from one region to another or from one land market area to another. I would encourage you not only to look at the report, but to look at the data we have on our website, because there you can not only dive into more details by region, you can look at any one of our 33 land market areas, which are smaller groupings of counties across the state. This is the perfect time to do that because that land market area data is only presented annually. So at the end of the fourth quarter, that's available now on our website. And so you'll be able to get a fresh picture of what's gone on and how that compares. I would encourage you to look, when you look at the year-over-year changes, and even when you read the report, you see a statistic that may be interesting to you year over year. I would encourage you to look at the data on the website and see how that compares to, say, 2 or 3 years prior. Because in some cases, you might see a small price increase year over year from 23 to 24, but then you look back and go, hey, compared to 22, that's still really good, or maybe it's not as impressive. And so, that's what the data on our website allows you to do, is really look at more long-term comparisons and so on. With that, I would encourage you to consider attending our Outlook conference, our annual conference that we hold in San Antonio in April 10th and 11th at the Hyatt Regency on the Riverwalk. Because there, not only are we going to talk about these kinds of details, but by that point, we'll have preliminary results from the first quarter of 2025. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what that's going to tell us. And I'll be able to share insights, again, statewide and by region, as to see what kind of changes are we seeing, what kind of differences do we see in different pockets of the state. And so encouraged to see you there. I'm really curious to see what you all think about the trends that we've presented here for 2024. Leave comments in the comments section below the video on social media. We look forward to hearing from you and hope to see you in San Antonio next month.